Hello, we are live on YouTube. Welcome back to another episode, our second episode of From the Trenches, and where we talk to editors about their edits and editors who are in the trenches every day doing their thing. Today we've got Fernanda, who edited both the most recent Laci Peterson, number one. We are number one, Laci Peterson, in the United States right now, streaming. And we're going to talk about that with her in just half a second. And not for nothing, also was number one for weeks and weeks on Netflix. The feature doc, Girl in the Picture, we're going to touch on that as well. Fernanda and I edited on season 1 of Amanda to the Rescue. Fernanda was on season 2. We both edited on what we like to call JWAB, Judgment, with Ashley Banfield. That was on Court TV. And so Fernanda and I have been in the trenches quite a long time, both separately and together. And so let's bring her out right now. Fernanda, come on out. Welcome, Fernanda.
Hey, Trench buddy, how are you?
How you doing? How you doing?
Really have been in the trenches.
I'm going to flip us. There we go. I'm going to flip us. So we're looking, because it flipped us back after I fixed it. Yes. Hello, Trench buddy.
Hello. I was going to tell you that logo in the beginning is really snazzy. It's almost like a professional editor made that, huh?
I mean, come on. Thank you. That was the best logo that my money on Fiverr could buy. So thank you, Fiverr. I'm not making any money off of Fiverr.
Cool.
So what I wanted to do was I wanted to play the trailer first, but unfortunately, it got hit for a copyright infringement if I were to play it. So I was going to risk it and play it anyway, but I last minute, as we discussed, I'm not going to risk it. Sorry to say, but we're going to recreate it using sock puppets. No, that would be ludicrous. So, but hey, for everybody out there, if you're watching, feel free to comment right now on the live. I will see your comments. We can answer any questions you have. So feel free to chime in. But here we go. Fernanda, editor. And pronounce your last name, because I don't want to mutilate it.
Yeah, that's fine. Tornaghi.
Oh, which is exactly how I would have pronounced it. All right. Tornaghi. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure. Yeah. All these years, I've just known her as Fernanda.
Yeah.
So, hey, man. So, first of all, congratulations on and her director. She's now worked on both Girl in the Picture and Laci Peterson together with Skye Borgman. Y'all are knocking it out of the park. This is such a good director-editor marriage, I think.
I agree. I think, Skye and I are super aligned in terms of what we believe, how to tell a story, honor victims is really important to both of us, not sensationalize crime stories, which are so easily and often sensationalized, and it's a marriage made in heaven, really. Professional marriage made in heaven. Yeah.
And having seen both Girl in the Picture and the Laci series, of which episode 3 was your episode, though I think you did work on 1 and 2 as well.
I did contribute in certain scenes in both 1 and 2, but episode 3 is the one that I owned, and from the beginning. Yeah. So
right. Yeah, I mean, just a fantastic job on both projects, and in Girl in the Picture and in Laci, I feel like you really did honor the victims in both of these. It's not sensationalized, you know what I mean? It's not, I didn't feel like I needed a shower afterwards like I do with some true crime where you're like, I don't feel
I
so,
know.
you
I
know,
know.
even though they're both very
Yeah.
difficult topics, it's, I think really well handled.
I mean, super, super difficult topics, heavy, very difficult to broach. And, to tell a story that doesn't feel, I guess, gratuitous,
Right.
like that there's a reason to be retelling this story for people to hear these stories, which is so important and still relevant. I think that's the reason why Laci resonated with so many people. This story is still relevant to all of us. Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, yeah.
And ongoing. Yeah, thank you, Darcy. Yeah, a binge
Oh,
is a good word. I really intended to watch one episode a night, and I started it and I couldn't stop it, and I know a lot about the case because I live in San Francisco which is where I met Fernanda, though she's down in La La Land now. Uh but uh yeah, just incredible work. I agree 100%. Uh and let's really quickly though, before we dive into Laci, which we want to, because not for nothing, come on, 1 billion streams, and this is from days ago. This is from August 16th.
that was that week. Yeah, last week. That's actually 1 billion minutes
Oh,
streamed,
1
but
billion minutes
it's
streamed. Okay.
yeah, yeah,
That's
but
that's
it's
a lot of
incredible. It's
minutes.
incredible. It's a
Yeah.
lot of minutes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you topped Emily in Paris, which is impressive. And not for nothing, Love is Blind UK, which I recently binged over many, many days, and is
Oh, really?
a great version of Love is Blind. If you're a fan of that genre, this will do you right. But seriously, I just, and also not for nothing, far more than the face to face with Scott Peterson on Peacock. Sort of a, not, it's not, they're not at all related, and in fact, they are very, very different in how
Mhm.
they approach the subject matter. Uh, but I like that you're beating them on Peacock. I just kind of like that. So,
But they still made it, and look,
yeah.
they had only been out for 3 days at that point, so
Oh,
we
is that
have to
true?
also have
Yeah.
to give
So
them that. Yeah,
we need to recheck
yeah,
that. Yeah, definitely.
yeah.
But still, I mean, super impressive. And super quickly, what I want to do is let's talk super quickly about Girl in the Picture before we really dive into Laci, because
Okay.
I know from talking with you that and for anyone who hasn't seen Girl in the Picture, it's still on Netflix. Go stream it. It is fantastic. It's a feature doc, and it is absolutely fantastic. Um, and so small spoilers here, but not enormous spoilers. Just as a heads up to anybody who hasn't seen Girl in the Picture. But I know because I remember asking you about the sleepover slash rape scene, and in Girl in the Picture, and the placement of it was so clutch in the storytelling of it. And then I remember you telling me that not only was that placed in several different places prior, but the entire thing in the 11th hour, the entire documentary was kind of renoodled by Netflix request, right?
Well, I don't know if I'd say the 11th hour, but it was kind of halfway through the process.
Well, it's a
Yeah.
7.5 hour.
Let's be dramatic, right?
Yeah, there you go.
Speaking of sensational, yeah. Um, so yeah, I think in every documentary there's that scene that it's so important, it's so crucial, but it just takes forever to find its perfect placement. There's always that scene that you end up tweaking up until the last minute, right? And this was one of those scenes in Girl in the Picture. It was a very difficult scene to place because, like again, it was very heavy, very difficult, very emotionally draining. It had a tone that needed to be very kind of heavy and dark because it's a very heavy and dark moment in the characters, in Suzanne's life. But also, you needed to have enough context of Suzanne to understand what that meant emotionally and to relate to it on a human level and not just be like, well, this was another, I mean, it's horrible to say this, but it's just another woman who was raped, because so many women are raped, right? Like, and you have to humanize this woman. So we needed, the film was flipped on its head a couple of times. Netflix suggested that we have the main narrator of the film, the through line, be the FBI agent who investigated the case. And that wasn't the case before. And in order to have him be the through line, we had to start the film at a completely different point where we started before. It was a much more chronological film at first. And I think Netflix had a really good suggestion in that regard. And so we figured out that the only way to tell the story through this FBI investigator's point of view was to start with her death. It's where it's the inciting incident. It's where it's where the investigation starts. But not only her death, but also her son's kidnapping, which happens directly after her death. So we had to expose all that, give all that context before you ever learn who this woman really was in the past, like her backstory, right? And so the best friend from high school's story only comes into the movie like much later, when she learns about the investigation on the news, and then she comes into the story as a character. She approaches the FBI. She says, "No, I knew this woman. You have the wrong name. This is not her name." And all the twists and turns that happen in the film. And so that was the first thing. The story, the rape story, could only be told after she comes into the story, which is much later now, right? Like half an hour. I don't remember anymore how long, but way later.
Where was it before you started screwing with the chronology of it?
It was the very beginning. High school was the very beginning of the film at one point.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, that would have been that would set a really much different tone. I mean, the tone was dark anyway, but that's so dark.
It's a different tone, and the person who was telling the story from the beginning was the writer of the book. And so we had him telling it in a much more chronological way, but then Netflix felt like it was more active if you you just felt like you're in the moment with the investigation. And I think they're totally right about that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then the writer only now comes in the third act, which is where he actually came into the story, really, is when he learned about this woman missing much later and decided to write a book about her after it had become a cold case. So it's more true in a lot of ways. It's more true to the chronology of how the facts happened, But so with the rape scene, we had to also be mindful that there was one point in the movie. So Jenny comes in, the best friend from high school, tells the FBI, "I know this woman. You have the wrong name. She's not who you think she is," and that sends the investigation into a completely different, it's a big reveal. Like she says, "This is not her husband, it's her father. I know this man that you're looking for, who you think kidnapped her son, as her father," right? So they're like, whoa. And then it sends the investigation into a completely different tailspin, kind of, and we had to be mindful of also keeping track of both the investigation and Sharon's life, and disclosing these facts. I mean, the story was so complicated. There was so much to reveal. Another thing was, how do you reveal things in like dose, the way you reveal these things in a way that are digestible, that people can understand all of it, right? And so we had to keep going back to the investigation. We had to reveal things in a digestible way. We also were mindful of keeping, narratively, we wanted to keep escalating the level of evilness that this man perpetrated on her and her son, So we ended up finding that place for the rape scene in a moment in time where you're becoming aware of how inappropriate he was, but you're still not sure how evil he is. You're just like, this man is inappropriate, right? You don't know he killed anybody yet, right? And then you learn about the rape, and then you go, this is a real monster. This is horrible, right? And you feel for her because you already know who she was. You've been through high school with her. You've met her two best friends in life, in the strip clubs. And so that was the natural progression for us. It was basically like, a narrative arc that worked.
Yeah, that worked so well. I mean, just was so I was just completely oh my God. Because then now we've gotten to know so much about her. And when that hits, now you have to go back and rewrite a whole bunch of stuff in your mind about her, knowing that there is no way that's the first time that happens. And we know it's not because of what she said to the friend. That's just
Yeah,
daddy, like, it's just what he does, so it's,
I know.
and just then you've got to be like, oh, what untold horror beyond what we've seen now has gone on. So that's
Yeah,
and interesting because, I mean, a lot of times you get like a massive note like that from a network and you're just like, what, are you serious? But like in this case, and every now and again, you know it makes it better. Like it was just such a solid way to tell the story, and the story unfolded in such a perfect way, that I just love what you and Sky Borgman, the director, just did with that. In the telling of that was just fantastic.
I mean, thank you. And I have to say, one of the things I've learned, and every project is a learning experience. Every documentary is a challenge. There's always, challenges to solve. But the one thing I've
Right.
learned is, right, is try everything once, at least once. Try stupid notes, because even if you don't think it's going to work, it might. Sometimes you surprise yourself, they actually work, and sometimes they don't, but you come up with a third thing that you never would have thought of because you tried that note that you didn't believe in.
Right.
So just give it a shot.
Right.
I
I'd
mean,
say that
documentary is incredible.
that's always that's the one thing that I'm like, I try and like, I work on the most, is like default to saying yes, because it's so easy to be like, no, that won't work. And if you just do
Right.
it, and sometimes it's right, but if it's not good, then they see it not being good. And a lot of times
Yeah,
they can't wrap their mind around why it wouldn't work until you show them it doesn't work.
exactly. And I remember in Girl in the Picture, the co-editor, by the way, shout out to Edward Wardrip, who was my co-editor on the film. He's amazing. Um, he and I, we restructured scenes so often in Girl in the Picture that we even developed a language. We would call it "drop it like a bomb," right? Which meant just hacksaw, cut it in. Don't care about transitions. Don't do anything. Just throw it in. You know, all these different pieces together in a different order, and we'd watch it and be like, okay, does this make sense? But like, try to forget all the transitions that are missing, the music that's
Right.
missing, everything, right? Just like narratively, does this work? And sometimes people get daunted by that process of restructuring, but I think sometimes that's what you have to do. You just throw everything around and you just sit down and watch it, and you're like, okay, let's talk about this. This is really resonating for me, or this scene lost power, like I said, because you found out he killed someone before he raped someone. Suddenly rape doesn't seem like such a terrible offense, even though it is, because you already killed somebody, right?
Right.
So all those things that we had to measure. And so just try it. That's basically my
Right.
mantra at this point, is like, just always try something to know it
Let's
doesn't work
see.
or know it
Yeah.
works,
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
All right, let's move now to good old Laci Peterson and this whole story from Netflix. This was unlike Girl in the Picture, this 3-episode arc. And I want to talk about a lot of things about this, but I do want to start with talking about, like, did your mindset in crafting the story for a 3-episode arc, what is the mindset there, compared to the feature doc in the telling of the story? Do you think was there any way you approached it differently?
I mean, it's interesting. So in Lacey, we had a big team. It was 3 editors at first. We ended up 4 editors because one of us had to leave early, and so it was overall 4 editors. Three, well, one showrunner who came up as a story producer. So she's an amazing producer, story brain, and 2 story producers. And so we had a lot of people contributing to the telling and crafting of this story. Obviously, we met weekly to talk about story because anything that happens at any given point affects everyone else, especially me. I'm the most affected by everything that gets shuffled around, right?
Right.
And so that happened a couple of times where, episode 2 ends in a different place. Suddenly episode 3 needs to start in a different place, and so on and so forth. Scenes moved from one episode to another. But yeah, for sure, crafting a 3-episode arc is very different. It's very different. But on the other hand, it kind of isn't, because it's always the 3 structure, right? The 3-act structure, the 3-episode structure, right? You end up kind of doing that same kind of, storytelling, what is that called? Format, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of editing, for me, the most challenging part was being able to keep track of everything that was happening in every other episode before me, so that I knew, what am I paying off here? What is falling flat? What doesn't make sense anymore? What needs to go because now it's not existent somewhere else? Or do we need to go into the subject here? Do I need to introduce the subject, or is it already introduced and now it's just a callback? So it was this constant dialogue. I mean, Slack was very active. We were always talking, for sure.
Thank goodness for Slack.
Oh my God, thank goodness. And always constantly revising, moments and scenes. And yeah, so that's different. But I wasn't in charge of crafting the entire arc of the series. That was more Gina Scarlatta, our amazing producer, showrunner, who was overseeing everything. And then Kendall Bozio, one of the story producers, and I worked very closely on episode 3 most of the time. Eric Adelson, also a story producer, the supervising story producer, also worked with us, but more on a supervisory level. And Kendall and I were on the grounds, boots on the ground in episode 3, crafting it the whole time. So, and we had a very collaborative process. It wasn't like the old process that you and I are used to, that we did in previous projects, where the story producer just hands you something and you just run with it, and you don't have time, so you just gotta
and then you rarely talk to that story producer again, right? Like they hand it off, right, and they're gone, and you're like, let's make this a show.
Like, let's put music and B-roll and try to tie a bow around this and make it watchable, right? No, not like that. It was a lot of back and forth. It was amazingly, I mean, love the people I worked with on this show. Super collaborative. I remember Kendall would send me string outs. I would watch them, and I give her notes, and I would send them back to her. She would find more bites, or find different things, and then I would edit the string outs into scenes, and I would show them to her, and she would give me notes, and I would, it was just a lot of back and forth, and it was amazing. It was just great.
I love that.
It was great. We had the time to do that. Yeah.
Did you have anything that moved into episode 3 from an earlier act, or vice versa? Was there anything that was initially earmarked for you where they're like, psych, we're putting that in ep 1, or whatever?
Yes, actually, there was, in fact, a story that used to live in episode 3 that was the story about the burglary across the street.
Oh.
Yeah, that started, we started that story, I think in Rough Cut 1 and 2, that story was in episode 3. Oh. And yeah, and then it just wouldn't, it was like trying to fit, it just didn't fit. It didn't fit no matter where we put it. And then we realized, well, the reason why it doesn't fit is because it never really was in the trial. And the bulk of episode 3 is the trial, right? The arrest and then the trial. And that story was not explored in trial. And so we're like, oh, this is actually misrepresenting the truth in a way. We can't have it here. Even if we're not saying it's in the trial, because it was edited in and around the trial, it just felt wrong.
Right.
And so it moved to episode 2. And so Aaron Perry, the editor of episode 2, and I had a lot of conversations about how to reshape that scene, because I had known the material for that scene very well, and Kendall Bozio as well. So we helped her understand wherever, what she had to work from. I mean, also Laci had an amazing, huge amount of archival material to start from. Yeah, it was like literally the first day that I went into the selects for episode 3 was 24 hours of archive. Yeah.
Whoa.
And I learned that an Avid timeline does not play beyond 22 hours or something like that. So it wouldn't play. I was like, guys, help me out here. You
Break
have to
this
trim
into
this a little.
2. Yeah.
Well, at least that. Yeah, like help me out. I can't even watch this.
Oh
So
my God.
so that was crazy. That was a challenge. That was one challenge.
Oh
Um,
man.
yeah, so there was that collaboration with Aaron, reshaping that scene, and ultimately it was perfect. It just belonged in episode 2. That's where it belonged.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I felt
So
like it came in at that surprised me because I felt like that wasn't even a
mhm,
scene that I had been thinking. I wonder if this, because as an editor, you try and get immersed in what you're watching, but there's always some part of my brain that's like, "Oh, I wonder if they tried that scene earlier and it didn't work." Like that seems like something that might have at first in first string out would have been an ep1, but you know what I mean? Like there's always a couple of
yeah,
things like that in my mind as I watched it. And uh and that yeah, and but not with this series. Like there wasn't anything when I watched Girl in the Picture, I wondered about that rape scene. As soon as I saw it and it was so perfectly placed in the order of things, uh that I was like, I bet that's not where it started. Like I
uh-huh,
thought that in the moment. I'm like, that was a heavy scene, and I bet they noodled with that quite a bit. But I can't really think of anything. So it kind of surprises me with Laci that got moved. And there's nothing. Did you have to look through the trial transcripts? Like, were there transcripts of the trial?
um, yes, there are transcripts. I didn't really have to look through the transcripts, no,
'Cause
I mean
it's pretty well told through the reporters and the and I have to say just the interviews that you guys got were
mhm,
just fantastic. Uh, and, um, and one of not to derail you super quickly, but one of the interviews that I did wanna talk to you about was Lacey's mom, which is a huge get. That was so
mhm,
whoever the producer was that managed to rope the mother in, just fantastic. She was great and
yeah,
powerful, I thought. Uh, along with, I mean, I felt like every interview was really, really well done, including the 2 jurors who cracked me up so hard. Um,
yeah,
but, especially the one guy who was adamant about, like, "This guy is innocent unless you
yeah,
like, that dude, I'm like, that dude needs his own, like,
I
Spotify
know,
podcast, man. But the mom, I just just having to all of the editors having to be the messenger of that mom's pain it's such a
yeah,
delicate dance in the edit. And I just felt like she was so strong through the whole thing.
yes. Yeah, I mean, first off, kudos to Sky, and, shout out to, yeah, one of the most, I think, empathetic directors that I've ever
Mm,
seen in action. She made it, as comfortable as it can be, for Sharon to sit there 20 years later and remember all those moments that are the most painful moments in her life, and to, just made it possible for her to do that and keep going. And yeah, so Sharon's interview had the challenge of being, kind of short. For obvious reasons, Sharon had a hard time going through these memories, and right off the bat said there are certain things I can't talk about, and of course we all respect that. And so that, for me and for all of us, was a challenge of how do we balance, right, the 2 points of view of these 2 sides of the story, these 2 families, right, that went through something horrific, both of them, right,
right.
when we had so little in terms of time from Sharon, And so much from Scott's sisters, sister-in-law and sister. We had very long interviews with them where they go into a lot of detail about everything. And Sharon's were more kind of top line and, just very emotional though, very emotional. So one of the things that I tried to, it was interesting because Sharon's interview was done much later than all the interviews.
Oh.
And so probably scheduling challenges or something. I'm not sure, but she came in much later. We had already started editing, so we had already like a full internal rough cut of episode 3 when Sharon's interview came in.
Oh, wow.
And everybody, I mean, episode 1 had already gone to Netflix. Everybody had already a cut before Sharon's interview, and so it was a big push to like make sure that we included her everywhere as much as possible, and if possible drove the narrative as much as possible. But in episode 3 there was very little to go from, and from Sharon. And one of the things that I tried to make a lot of use of, because it's so strong on her, is her silence, for instance. Right. There are moments where she just looks at you and you can tell what's going on through her mind, and she can't voice it, and it's like chilling, and just used everything I could, everything that was available for her to tell us about, the story that was in episode 3 we used, and then try to balance it out a little bit more with the sisters, temper the sisters down a little bit more, because it was very heavy on them at first, because they were the only family members we had, right?
Right.
Yeah. In episode 3 is a challenge too, because for me, it was very important to keep Laci alive, and episode 3 is so heavy on the story of the trial, the arrest and then the trial, right? So you barely even see Laci, right? You think of her and you feel her presence when she's found at the top of the episode, and then we go into like investigative procedural mode, and you never leave that until you leave the trial. But Sharon would give us these moments of emotion during the trial that we tried to find, like, the placement for. It was really hard. We try to go not for too long without having something from Sharon, and it was so hard to find that balance. But I feel like, having watched it recently, I feel like we did really a good job of balancing that out. And then at the end, it was really important for us that we ended on a big legacy section for Laci, because the episode was so heavy, on the crime, right? It was important to us, and it's even I believe Sharon says it. I don't know if it's in the show. I don't remember anymore. But she says, I don't want her to be remembered just for what happened to her.
Yeah,
she was
that's
a person.
in there.
Yeah, that's in there, right? So
yeah,
and that was important to us too. So that's why we created that section.
I loved that section. I thought that was so important because because it's not called Scott Peterson, American Murder Scott Peterson. It's called American Murder Laci Peterson. So to give her the last word, I thought was really great. And and that montage was fantastic. That montage that you did, I love the timing of it, where the pictures start off changing with the beat, and then they shift to like every couple of beats. And I just thought like that montage was just really well crafted. Like, bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
You did a great job.
I was very protective of that montage, that whole section up until the end. And I am proud to say that's one of the parts of the episode that changed the least from rough cut to picture lock. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it changed a bit for pacing, for some characters that used to be in the show that are no longer in the show. We had to remove, unfortunately, from the montage, but it's pretty much what we created from the start. And I'm very proud of that. It was really important to all of us also, I think, to end the series to zoom out, to go to honor Laci and Laci's story and her but then her legacy. what lives on after she's no longer with us, right? Her legacy, and zoom out to the world, the globe, to all women, right?
Right.
And I thought when that question was asked to Sharon, what do you think is Laci's legacy? Because that was the question.
Right.
The last 2 minutes of the show that you hear are basically the answer. I cut pauses. I just cut like maybe, one word or another, but like that's her answer. And she says, when she says, you don't know how many women wrote to me over the years and said because of Laci, they left in time. That was like
So,
incredible. And I think that's her legacy. I thought it was really important to end on that like she's still here. She's still
right.
saving women's lives. People are, knowing when to leave an abuser because, they tuned into this story and think about what happened to Laci.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah.
agreed completely. Yeah, and it's surprising because you wouldn't know that the mom was added late. You guys really did a fantastic job of integrating her in. Sorry, Cashew loves true crime.
Special
Ma
appearance. Yeah.
massive, massive fan of true crime. Uh,
Okay.
uh,
Well, thank you. Thank you for saying that. That means a lot. As an editor, you have a technical eye for that kind of thing. So that means a lot
Oh, yeah,
coming from you.
yeah, flawlessly fit in there. I do wanna talk super quickly about the jurors, and I mean, you must have just cracked up. I'm sure there's tons
Yeah,
of stuff that's not in there where you were just like,
there there
I love
was.
this
Yeah.
line, I can't make this line work, but I love the way he says this line because they were
Oh man,
especially the one guy was just such a character.
such a character. Such a character. What was it? That dollar won't buy you a cup of coffee at Starbucks. I mean,
Yeah,
that was a
yeah,
favorite,
right.
right?
Come on.
That was a favorite. And
Sorry about the cat.
yes, there was a lot more. There was a lot more. There was, in fact, another juror a third juror that we had, yeah, that we really tried to fit him in, but in the end, you know how it is. There's these parts that
Right.
you end up having to shuffle around, and it just ends up feeling like, well, someone else already said this. There isn't anything new, and so he ended up having to go. But there was a hilarious moment when Mike, the funny juror, described this third juror as like he was always the note keeper. He was always the one who kept track of everything that was happening inside and then you would see the guy's face smiling. It was hilarious, but we're all like, is it too cheeky? Maybe.
Uh,
But in the end, it ended up going because there was just no
right.
time for it, really. Yeah, but
Yeah,
yeah, they were great. I love the jurors. I love how honest they are about their arc,
yeah.
right? Of coming into the trial completely open minded. In fact, Mike more biased towards Scott's innocence,
Seriously.
right?
And just yeah,
Seriously.
and super indignant of like, you know, uh, "Oh, the affair proves nothing." And I'm like, "Oh, that's like
Yeah,
it's such a guy attitude to have." It's like,
totally.
when I was working on Menendez, the jury was split completely down gender lines. This is, of course, back in the '80s,
Mm,
but it was split. The men absolutely would not believe that a father uh, would sexually abuse his own sons. They just refused to
yeah,
believe it, and all the women believed it. And so it was funny to see these
right.
like now that was the 1980s. Fast forward, 40 some odd years, 50
Yeah.
years, no, 40 years. I'm getting old. And then watching your jurors, as soon as he said like, the affair meant nothing, I was like, oh, here we go. Nothing's changed. Nothing's changed.
Yeah,
Of
yeah.
course, a guy is going to go in with that thought of like, that doesn't prove anything. Guys have affairs all the time, So,
But
uh,
at the same time but at the same time, it's great because he said something that I thought was incredible. It's like, yeah, the affair means nothing, and he could have had an affair and not killed his wife, but what meant a lot to them was the lying,
yeah.
right?
And the
It was the lying.
timeline, when they saw the timeline of,
Yeah.
super quick, Sheila's asking, "Are we gonna see some of the film?" Unfortunately, YouTube will ping me for copyright infringement. So I wanted to show the trailer for Laci, but YouTube's like, you cannot show that without permissions. And so
Yeah.
so apologies, but I will remind folks that it is currently on Netflix, and you can also see on YouTube, posted by Netflix, so allowable, the trailer to it. No, I'm sorry, in this case I can't. I'm gonna work on, for future episodes, uh trying to get that copyright and permissions prior.
Mhm.
But this time we can't. But thank you for asking, Sheila. I do appreciate the question. Um, but yeah, I thought with the jurors, it was super interesting how the timeline for them of like when he told her his wife was already
Mhm.
like missing or dead. I guess he said initially dead, as if I'm remembering, and then that was the same day he purchased the boat, and
Mhm.
all of that,
Mhm.
like that timeline. I really loved how changed they both were by that lining up. Like, I thought, and
Yeah.
you feel the
Yeah.
impact of that, in my opinion, feel the impact of that in the episode really strongly.
Totally. And I to me, at least, it was is really important that because there's always, I mean, with a story like Laci, it's impossible to tell all the facts in 3 hours. There is so much, and a trial that lasted months and months.
Right.
So yeah, you can't go into everything. So we had to choose certain story points to go into. We tried to be fair and not slant the narrative, in a way, or another. And but my biggest worry, because we had to pick and choose, and it was that at the end you'd be left with the takeaway that Scott was convicted because of Amber Fry, which was a huge turning point for the jurors because of the lying, as he says, more than the affair, right? But we didn't want to give people that impression that was, as Mark Garagos used to say, he was convicted for being a cad, right? Um, right,
Right.
so it was really important to expose some of these facts. And in fact, I remember one thing. I remember is at the end of the trial there was a section, there was a little montage that we created in record time, in basically chatting on Slack, me, the three producers, right? And like, how can we create a section where it becomes clear that this is I mean, it's circumstantial evidence, all of it is. And I think basically that's why people are still discussing this case to this day, and
Right.
they always will, because it's all circumstantial. But the pile of circumstantial evidence that there is so overwhelming,
Right.
right? That's what Mike and the other, and I forget his name. Oh gosh, anyway, I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
I
I
can't. I
forgot
wish I had written
his
down
name.
their
But
names.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
The jurors. Yeah.
But right, right. But that's what the conclusion they came to. And then we had this little montage after they say this. We have a montage of Sharon Hagan, who's the FBI profiler, explaining all the circumstantial evidence that led them, or the major points, right, that led them to the conclusions at both the police and the DA. And then that sequence we built in like 2 hours, which is
Seriously.
incredible.
Oh my god, that's a great
Seriously,
sequence.
yeah,
So necessary too. It was really
so
necessary
necessary.
to button that whole thing up. Super necessary.
Exactly.
Wow,
That
that is my
uh,
I salute
yeah, it
you
was.
all.
But that was like 8 hands, like frantically typing on Slack, going, "How about that line? How about that, archive? How about that picture?" And just building it and building it. And it was important. It was really important to explain to people
Right.
who weren't in the courtroom that it wasn't just Amber Fry. It wasn't just he had an affair and lied. There was a narrative, a story that the DA and the police put together very meticulously to tell the
Yeah,
story. Yeah.
I mean, and especially damning at the top of the episode is, you know, uh, if her body had been found anywhere else but near the exact island he told, like, I feel like, was it the FBI profiler who said this, where she said like he didn't really think it all through, like, before he did it all.
Mm. Yeah,
because
that's Sharon Hagen, yeah.
yeah, because it's like, if he had said, we can't prove where he was boating. If he had said he went to Lake Berryessa instead of the
Right,
bay, San Francisco Bay, and then she's found in
right,
the bay, that it would be like, well, that seems coincidental, but we can't prove he was in either place. There's no way to prove it. So
exactly, yeah.
so the fact that he told the police that's where he was fishing, and she's found
Mhm.
right there. The one thing that I don't know if you even know the answer to this, but one of the questions I had was that the baby is found separately. So does not I don't want to be too uh gruesome about it, but does did the body expel the child, because she was 8 months pregnant, so like I was surprised that
Right.
the body is that the fetus was found
I
elsewhere.
know. I know. That was something that we struggled with, do we explain this? Do we go into this? It's very gruesome. We did have an opportunity to explain that at trial because they go into that at trial, but it was just very, very gruesome and difficult, and so we ended up deciding not to. But yes, basically that's what it was.
Okay.
And at that point, her body had been underwater for, I think, what, close to 4 months.
Right.
So it had been decomposing essentially, and eventually that's essentially what happened. Yeah, it
Right.
expelled the
Yeah.
fetus. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I figured, but I was like, oof. I mean,
Yeah.
how do you even yeah, that's there's not enough time to tell the full story anyway, so if you were gonna cut anything, cut that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
I get you on that.
And
Uh,
also, there was I think what finally, like, convinced me was, there's a line from Sharon where she says, "I went to trial every day except the day they told us about the conditions of her body."
yeah.
And I was like, I don't want Sharon to have to go
Yeah.
through this again
Oh,
either,
good point. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, good point, 100%. Because do you know, did the sisters of Scott I mean, you guys did keep a fairly balanced, approach to it, sort of impressively so, uh, uh, considering all the, uh, circumstantial evidence that stacks up. Uh,
Mhm.
uh, did the sisters watch it? Do you know, did the sisters and Lacey's mom, did they give any feedback to how they felt about it? Just out of curiosity?
I don't know if, um I don't know if Janie or Susan watched it. I have not heard. Um, I have heard that Sharon watched it and, thought that, was pleased, was
Good,
happy with it. Yeah,
good,
yeah,
good. You have to
yeah,
assume that if she's happy with it, probably the sisters are less so, um,
yeah.
but it's and this is just me, this is just my take, entirely. To me, like, I get why the sisters are hanging on to his innocence, but, like, at some point you gotta be like, you know, gut check. Could this have really, like, let's really, but that's just me. Anyway, I want to hit this question that Kristen, an editor that both Fernanda and I have worked with together, is asking, and I know that I myself, after doing uh 4 years straight of true crime, and then really brutal true crime stuff, going into police brutality and whatnot, I just had to take a break from true crime because my mental health. There have been true crime specifically the Menendez brothers, and then I did protect or neglect on Bounce, which is about police brutality in the African American community. both of those two projects, and they were 4 years apart, both of those sent me back into therapy. Both of them. I just couldn't carry it all myself. It's just kind of brutal.
Mm.
And these two, Girl in the Picture and Laci Peterson, are really, really heavy stuff. So it's a good question from Kristen, with a follow-up of, do you have a mental health routine? And so, both, yeah, really good points and questions. So yeah, Fernanda, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I guess I'll start with PTSD. I don't know, and I never thought I did. Um, but recently I've started sometimes, and I'm full disclosure, I'm on another true crime project at the moment. And recently I've started, there are moments when I just need to get up from my chair. Yeah. And just take a break and look out the window and be like, oh, I can't believe that this happened to someone, someone's daughter, someone's best friend. And it's rough. Some of the things that you see that we don't put on the screen a lot of times because nobody needs to see those things, but we do, right? Um, and I did start the other day. I was like, I need to watch something cute. So I went and I watched Inside the Minds of Dogs. And then I was like, I need more. And so I watched Inside the Minds of Cats. And I'm still not done with that. But I was like, I needed a palate cleanser. I was like, something cute. So maybe it is starting to get to me. But as far as a mental health routine, I do have one. And I have had one for many years before I ever even got into true crime. I've been in psychotherapy. Well, my therapist would say, "Don't. It's not therapy; it's analysis," because she's a psychoanalyst.
Oh.
She would yell at me. No, not really. She doesn't yell at me, so I've been on it for over 20 years. We talk once a week, every week, and so it makes a difference. We talk about everything. So oftentimes, I talk about my projects. I talk about the things I'm up to and how I'm feeling about them. Another thing I've started to do recently is I walk in the mornings every day before I start to work. I walk for at least 40 minutes just around my neighborhood, just like get some air, look outside, look, away from the screen, different point of view, see something different. And that helps a lot. And then at night I do some exercises because also for my back, because as editors, right? I've started
Yeah.
to have to do some physical therapy for my back, and that helps too. So I think trying to stay active, get up every once in a while and look out the window and just like take a break from something that is very sad or gruesome. But
And
therapy helps.
and also, I
Yeah.
think, I mean, with the, how heavy these two were, and the production values on both of these, Girl in the Picture and Laci Peterson, the way the recreations are made, it just is next level. Just so well
I mean,
done, the whole thing. And
Sky
I
Boardman
mean,
is amazing at
Sky,
that.
listen, I don't know
Really.
you,
Yeah.
Sky, but I salute you and I'm loving your work, and continue to hire Fernanda. I'm just saying. Uh, but I won't name any names, and certainly Kristen will know this. She'll know what I'm talking about as well on the side. But Fernanda, Kristen, who just posed that question, and I have both all worked on some very, very low rent true crime, that for an unnamed company. I won't.
Unnamed production company.
Yeah, I won't say. But if you find a production company that's done 7 different shows all on Ted Bundy using the same footage, you'll know the company that we're talking about. But uh,
People
those
people are gonna get off this thing and go to IMDb and check all our
and
credits,
check
guys. Be
in
like,
and
where's the
say
worst
what
thing happened?
company has done the most on Ted Bundy. Uh, but on those, I mean, it's a little easier to shake off, than on the higher, like when I was doing Menendez, just the production value is so high, and you're so dug into it, and it's just, it
Yeah.
really, that kind of stuff for me. It's I'm gonna hit up though the Inside the Minds of Dogs and Cats, for me, and I also suggest Old Enough on Netflix. It's
Okay,
toddlers in
great.
Japan,
Oh,
running
amazing.
errands. They're between the ages of 2 and 4, and they run their errands solo for the first time. And that's like a big thing culturally in Japan. And
Really?
so, yeah,
Wow.
it's and for me, like, oh, that is like a great, and the 15-minute apps, great equal. I'm not paid any money by the people who created Old Enough. Uh, but I highly recommend it. I believe it's also on Netflix. I'm also not paid by Netflix for pimping any of this. If I were, we
Right.
would have had the rights to showing the trailer. But one thing we've got 5 minutes left. The one
Okay.
thing I want to make sure to talk to you about super quickly before we go, I know you cut on Avid, and I got it.
Oh, the hardest question.
I gotta ask you, this is absolutely the hardest question. And also, before I ask this hardest question, I do want to do a shout out to Campfire Studios, that, is the studio behind both of these. I forgot to give them a shout out, but I want to give Campfire Studios a shout out because y'all are kicking out some really good content. So salute. But here's the question. What, and I'm sorry, Kristen, that I neglected to ask you and Heidi the same question, and I meant to. Fernanda, what is your
Yeah.
favorite keyboard shortcut?
Ooh,
I know.
that is the hardest question. But before I answer that, I just also want to give a shout out, which I didn't earlier and I should have, when we talked about Laci's legacy section, to Jimmy Stouffer, the composer of both
Oh,
Laci and Girl in the Picture.
oh,
Amazing musician and composer. So real big shout out in that section. He did like in the Laci legacy section, he did an amazing job. And that music still like echoes in my head from time to time of how beautiful that is. But yeah, so I've been thinking about this all week and I don't know because it's just the hardest question. But I think so I'm gonna say probably something that is not really fully a shortcut, but it's like a hybrid of a shortcut, which is option lassoing. Does that
oh,
count?
sure.
Does that count? So
Yeah.
option lasso, I use it all day long because I'm a big trimmer. I use trim mode like every 2 seconds when
Constantly.
I'm editing, right? Constantly. And I love this about Avid. And it's the one reason why I love Avid more than Premiere is how solid its trim mode is.
Yeah.
So, right? So as soon as I learned that I could option lasso, I don't have to, go into like I don't have to choose all the tracks and then go into trim mode. No, I can option lasso the tracks that I want with my mouse and then choose those tracks to go into trim mode and then do my trim. That's my favorite all-time operation.
I didn't know. I'm gonna use that. I did not
Oh,
know that.
great.
That you don't have to
Really?
turn the tracks on first. You can just option lasso
No,
around the clips,
exactly. The cut, around the cut, the very
around the
cut.
cut, the
Yeah.
cut point.
And you lasso from left to right. So then you option
You
lasso,
backwards, option backwards lasso.
right. Because if you do from right to left, you select the clip.
And by
Also
the way,
with option.
and Kristen is saying E for extend. E for extend native on Premiere is the E for extend.
Good.
I've also mapped it E for extend on
Oh
Avid.
yeah,
So it does the
me
both
too.
same. So I don't have to rethink that in my mind,
Yeah,
but I wanted to throw that up there.
yeah.
Also, we have a late question here from Darcy, super quick. I want to get this question in. Uh,
Mhm.
I know we're coming to the end, but Darcy says you mentioned Netflix had feedback on the narrative. How early did Netflix get involved in that part of it? And I'm going to say probably pretty early.
From inception. I mean, these are original Netflix projects, shows, both Girl in the Picture and Laci. So from the inception, yeah, they were there from development, they're already involved. Yeah. So yes, we had feedback on every cut. They gave feedback on the outlines that were written for the show and the everything basically. Yeah. They're very involved. They're really
Yeah.
co-producers. Yeah.
Good question, though. Very good question. And really quickly, since
Yeah.
we were talking about Avid, I just want to say if you're out there watching and you want to know what I feel like the must know Avid settings are, you can pick it up free PDF at Avid Guide. And you'll see what I feel like the bit. That's not my favorite keyboard shortcuts. I will make that one because and I'm so
Yeah,
glad that
yeah,
Kristen got to weigh in. And please, we need to ask Heidi, Kristen, what her favorites were. But if you want to know
I know.
what I feel like the must know Avid settings are so that you start properly, like having alternating left right, like right for your audio. Do you listen to it all centered, or are you doing left and right and then mid panning your audio, Fernanda? What do you do with your talking?
Wait, so sorry, what was the question again?
Like
Sorry,
for
I spaced out
one
for a
one
second.
one of the settings, I always have my Avid setting on alternating left right, so I can hear if all the talking's only coming out of one ear than the other.
Yeah.
But if you leave it on centered, everything's going to come out of both ears until you lay it off for your director, and then it's all coming out of one ear because you didn't know. But
Oh,
maybe,
yeah, no,
yeah,
I don't leave it centered. I wanna hear what is there, if
where
whether
it's
it's
coming out,
left or right.
and then mid
Yeah.
pan it in the timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. I think
Yeah.
that's best, yeah.
For that kind of setting and more, grab this Avid guide. You won't be sorry. And not for nothing, free. It's free. So uh
Amazing.
here we are. We're at 6. That's 1 hour. I don't want to prattle on too long, but I want to remind people, Laci Peterson, right? And you can watch this now on Netflix if you go to netflix.com/Laci Peterson, or go to wherever you stream your content, and go to Netflix. And if you want to talk about this on any social media, hashtag Netflix Laci Peterson is the hashtag being used for this show. I've used it myself already. And then, really exciting, well, I want to make sure to just super quickly remind folks that Fernanda's got an untitled Netflix special coming up. So keep your eye out for that. It's as of yet unknown, but we're very excited.
Yes.
And for everything that you got going coming up down the line, if you want to look up Fernanda on the IMDb and do a deep dive into the stuff she's cut, she's got a lot of fantastic content out there and ready for you. If you got any questions for me, you can leave them in the comments. And and thank you. Thank you, Mimi. Really, really appreciate that. Uh,
Oh,
and if you got any questions for me beyond what you see here, feel free to reach out to me at info@nleacademy.com. And that is it for us, folks. We've got no more time left. I will watch the Mimi. Don't forget to hit. I forgot to even say this. Don't forget to hit subscribe. Hit the like button, leave comments
yes.
as you are already. And Mimi, hit subscribe. Keep your eyes on this space. More good stuff coming down the line. Thank you. Thank you, Sheila. Thank you, Darcy. And thank you, Mimi. We'll keep you informed. That is going to be it for us today. Have yourself a safe and great long weekend, everybody. Thank you, Fernanda. Super appreciate it.
Thank
Continue to
you, thank you.
entertain me, please.
I will, I will.
And here we go. We are signing off. So thank you. We will see you next time. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want to see more of this really great content. See y'all later. Have a good long weekend.
Great.